So pranayama is the fourth limb of yoga. So we have the yamas, the niyamas, and then we have asana, and then finally we have pranayama. So pranayama in English means to retain energy or to retain life. So I think of it as when we're breathing, we're alive. When we cease to breathe, we expire. So breath, the ancient yogis looked at on as very important, and they studied the breath in order to have understanding of that relationship of how the breath is and what thoughts are going on in the mind. So breath work is really important part of yoga to center, calm, and focus our energy, not only in an asana practice, but as well as it's a big part of meditation. So the 8 limbs were supposed to be practiced in that order, in that way. So when we're not on the yoga mat, we practice our yamas and our niyamas, and then we come to the yoga mat to release tension out of the physical body, and then we start to incorporate pranayama with the asana practice. And then after we do the physical practice, pranayama can be used on its own to redirect energy or to unblock energy. And then once we find that unblocking of the energy and we find balance out in the energetic system, then we can get on to the last 4 limbs, which have to do with meditation. So breath is very important, and it's one thing we have control over in our body. We can't really directly control the heart rate. I mean, we can exercise and move and bring the heart rate up, but breath is one thing we can either have control of, or it can control it on its own without us even paying much attention to it. So that's one way of us regulating stress in the body, is through breathing. So there's about 50 different types of pranayama exercises that can be done. And just for the sake of practice and time, we will look at a few that are very, very common in a yoga class, and even not in a yoga class. We can just practice them on our own if we feel stressed or anxious or any of those things. So I'm going to teach a few of the common ones that I like to use in class that are pretty simple and easy to do. Looking at those breath and how it can we can bring energy to the body if we feel very tired, or we can relax and calm the mind, calm the body. So we're going to look at 3 different types of pranayama today. We're going to look at Ujjayi breath, Ujjayi pranayama. We're going to look at Nadi Shodhana, and we're going to look at Kapalabhati breath. So those are 3 breaths that do 3 different things. And as you might have noticed up until this point, we start our yoga practice with breath, and that's called just a regular breath, a 3-part breath, because for most of us, we breathe very shallow. We breathe just with the upper part of the lungs. We breathe in the chest. So what yoga teaches us is to breathe into the full belly breath and to use the belly to expand. So we have this diaphragm muscle underneath the lungs. That's the main muscle of breathing. And oftentimes when we're overly stressed out and as we start to age, we forget to use that muscle to breathe. So we start to just breathe with the muscles up here in the clavicles. So these are called like the scalene muscles, or the supraclavicular muscles that draw up the collarbones. And then there's muscle inside each of the in between the ribs, and they're called intercostal muscles. So oftentimes we breathe, and that's where we find tension in the shoulders when we're really stressed out, because we're using these muscles up here to breathe. And when we start to breathe faster, it's like a workout for those muscles, so they get tense and tight. Whereas if we start to belly breathe and we use this muscle a lot more, it's a dome-shaped muscle that fits underneath here, underneath the lungs. We can relax these muscles and build strength into the diaphragm muscle. And then one more thing before we go on to breath. So we have this diaphragm muscle, and then we have this nerve, and there's this nerve that runs from right here in the cerebellum all the way down through, and it branches off into the main organs called the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is a parasympathetic nerve, and it has many, vagus means wandering in English from Latin. And so it's a wandering nerve just for the reason it branches off in so many different places. It branches off in the lungs, in the heart, in a lot of the main organs of the body, as well as there's a lot of nerve endings in the gut here. So when we breathe really deep and that diaphragm really gets to go expand into the belly where all those nerve endings are, it triggers that vagus nerve. And when it triggers that vagus nerve, it triggers relaxation, that parasympathetic response. So that's what breathing deep really does. It really helps us relax up here and relax in that nervous system when we breathe, and we are very mindful of how we are breathing. So checking in next time if you feel stressed out. How is the breath? How can you change it? Slow and deep into the belly. And we'll get on to those 3 breaths. So let's see what's next. Ujjayi breath.